Now you must know things are very wrong right now. Hello and welcome to Counterspin Media. Now look, the word on the street is New Zealanders are absolutely furious that this government is trying to sneak through a bill that will significantly reduce your ability to access natural therapies and therapeutics. Now, I personally think this is probably one of the most darkest, oppressive bills ever, because it's not just therapies and therapeutics, but it also relates to foods as well that we can access. Now, before I play an interview with Philip, he's analysed this bill, there's some things that you really need to know. First of all, if you do not oppose this bill before the 15th of February, we're essentially giving 100% monopoly to the pharmaceutical industry. Now the problem is this bill is so broad, anything could happen. So anything that's non-pharmaceutical therapies and therapeutics, and also many foods that have a therapeutic potential, could be in serious jeopardy. So if us New Zealanders do not oppose this bill before the 15th of February, next time you go down to the supermarket and you want to buy some supplements, the shelves are going to be empty. You think, oh no, I'll go to the pharmacy. Well, the pharmacy's shelves are going to be empty as well. So pharmacies, Chinese doctors, pharmacies, naturopaths, herbal medicine specialists, their jobs are going to be in jeopardy over this. We might see all of these businesses close down as a result. If us New Zealanders do not oppose this bill before the 15th of February, it's not just products and therapies, but it's also medical devices that may be severely impacted. So I am a functional medicine practitioner, and here at the Brylan Functional Medicine Centre, we have many approved medical devices, and we've treated thousands of people from all sorts of particular conditions, very successfully, by the way. If we interpret this report correctly, we may no longer be able to use these machines because we haven't paid tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars on unjustified compliance and registration costs. Now, is that fair on us? Is that particularly fair on our clients who pay low cost treatments to come here? What about all the other practitioners around New Zealand? Is it fair? Does it make sense? Of course not. So if us New Zealanders do not oppose this bill before the 15th of February, even your own doctor, if we interpret the report correctly, might be gagged. They may no longer be able to recommend something slightly natural for you to do to complement the surgery or the treatment that you're going through. Even practices like intravenous vitamin C, which is an excellent treatment, particularly if you have cancer, looks like it's in serious jeopardy. Now you might be thinking, gosh, William, things couldn't get more tyrannical than that. Well, wait, there's more. Not only are they going to try to suppress natural products, but if a food has a therapeutic benefit, there could be a big question mark about whether that's in existence anymore. For example, coconut, aloe vera, cinnamon are just a few from many hundreds that are on the target list. So what does this mean? Does it mean we won't be able to access it anymore? Well, I don't really know. Could the prices be escalated because they're potentially therapeutic and now the governments are putting lots of taxes on it? I don't know. As I said, we don't 100% know, but it's in their power to do so. So I think New Zealanders are asking, is this really about our health? Or many are saying, this is because it's a tyrannical government. They want control. They don't want healthy people. Is it because they're putting big pharmacy or big business before, which is money, of course? Are they putting them first before the people of New Zealand? Well, what do you think? What's your opinion? Why don't you leave us a comment? Why don't you share this video? I really want to hear what you think. We're about to play the video that I have with Philip. I really thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave me some comments. And don't forget, Counterspin is reliant on your donations, so I'm sure they would appreciate your donations. Thanks for watching.
Well, I'd noticed for a kick-off that there are 423 pages to this thing. And I thought for a moment, we've never had anything like this ever that I can remember coming up in past history, where anything like that level of activity has been generated from a single supposed suspicion of something that's not quite right. So I wondered perhaps whether, when I looked at this 423 pages, which I'm sure the politicians have never even read, I might be out of place in saying that, but I believe that that's a huge amount of reading that they would have to go through and sift out for a kick-off.
And on that note of sifting out, I've noticed that they've made it very confusing, like you've got to go all over the place to get an understanding of what they're trying to do.
What I was alluding to was the fact that this unprecedented size and scale of what's been mooted suggests to me that the government is not actually in control at the driving route behind it. And it looks to me as if industry is more or less saying to the government what they want and how they're going to get it. And it looks to me as though the government is a puppet. It seems a very severe thing to say, but when you get 423 pages, an issue this big being generated out of a suspicion on this type of thing, which has never been happening before, I'm suspicious that it's purely an industry-driven falsification, and therefore it's something that I'm really doubtful about it being of anything other than pocketing dollars by industry.
We can even see in America now they've got a new food pyramid, and at the bottom they're classing Cheerios and Cocoa Pops healthier than vegetables, meat and eggs. And so obviously that's exactly the same situation, the government being influenced by commercial. I know in New Zealand here roughly 50% of people use natural products, and we know that roughly 80% of a lot of medicine is actually derived from plant products. It's just that they find an isolation, they patent it. Do you think, why do you think they're being so aggressive towards absolutely everything that's potentially medicinal?
Well, my deduction on the aggression lies in the fact that who's the driving force behind it? That recent study in Taiwan, where it was found that 45,000 times greater safety lies with natural products than chemical medicines, and I might be wrong in that quotation, but I believe it's a 45,000-fold improvement. So therefore, if we're using natural products that are so much better than drugs, this is an absolute absurdity in my mind to make out a list of these sorts of things and get rid of them.
And on that, I don't understand, why aren't they regulating a lot of these chemicals they're putting in food? Like when you start dissecting some processed foods, the chemicals they're using, they're proven carcinogenic. Yet, oh, that's fine. In fact, I sense that through the bill, they're going to try and naturalise or give the perception of these things being more natural.
Well, the problem, I think, basically is what you're saying, that the natural products are now being classed, if they're beneficial to any curative process, they're being classed as medicines. So does this mean, for example, I consider good fresh air a natural product? Am I going to have a license to be able to breathe? And it gets to that stupid state where you're questioning, what is the government doing? Now, I believe there's an issue here about government control. I might be a wee bit forthright in saying this, but when we had the lockdowns, for example, you're only allowed to go to a supermarket to buy food. Well, if we are trying to reduce the population in one particular spot, then you wouldn't load the supermarkets with all the people that want food. You'd allow the small businesses to remain open and you'd leave them in control of their own ship, and there would be a benefit in having a dispersion in the food buying population and so on. And so here we've got a system where control has now become almost, if you like, a major theme in government direction. And I question this, because if it's just major control, which is important, then the real motive underneath is that control, not the actual objective that, if you like, is whitewashed onto it.
I think if we actually saw what the government did and how they handled COVID and how they basically just pushed vaccine, that was it. no mention of any other potential things which have been proven to help our health. Like they've even wiped out drugs because it seemed to be very beneficial for COVID.
Well, it took 200 years for vitamin C to be recognised for a start, and I think that's a fairly fast rate of progress for the kind of thing that's generally what I'd call authorised, but it finally did get its attention. Yeah. I think what they're trying to do, if I read correctly, and I might be wrong in this, but it looks to me as if the bill is more or less saying that if you've got some product which improves your health when you've got a serious disease, that using that product is interfering with the medical trade. Now, the real issue at stake is they don't want people to get well, they want people to get well using their system. And there's a big difference in wanting people to get well and wanting people to get well using what you're making money on. So I question this issue of saying that it is wrong for me to use something that gets me well, or to even recommend to someone that I've used something that gets people well, in some way recommended it, that I'm doing the wrong thing. I have a question mark over this, and I use the example of people I know of personally who, with a terminal sentence given by the medical profession, have got completely well using other things. And this apparently is going to be considered a cardinal sin. Now, if this is the case, then are we trying to stop people helping others get well? Because that really is the issue. Because if something works quite well, it's quite harmless anyway, then there's no harm in having, and I'm talking about a food product obviously, no harm in using it. And I quote the example here of my own mother, terminal bone marrow metastasised cancer, and was told to take a world trip and wind her affairs up. And I suggested to my mother that one of us in the family could take her to an overseas clinic of her choice, or whatever she chose to do, we would support it. And I said I don't know much about cancer, because at that stage it was all new, facing something like this in the family circle. And what we did was we said, well, we've got to help Mum with the right kind of food, if we can best find the right kind of food. And at that stage we didn't know what the right kind of food was or wasn't.
What sort of year was this?
This is going back 40 odd years ago. And at this stage it was all a matter of trying to say, what can we do? Now the question is, am I practicing medicine because I'm organising meals for my mother? Not that I did, my wife did all that for me. But what I'm saying is, am I practicing medicine because I'm feeding somebody as best I can with a terminal condition? Now the question has to be looked at from another viewpoint, and that is that after a couple of years my mother got a clearance from cancer, and that clearance was valid, and the proof of it was that she lived 20 years more beyond the point where she was told to wind her affairs up and die. And I believe that the help that we gave her was beneficial. Now the question obviously has to be framed now in the light of this new bill that's coming in. If that was law and I was giving her food, or our house was providing food, it doesn't matter who's doing it, but I would be responsible, then am I practicing medicine, or am I practicing another extremely unusual thing called common sense? And my question here is this bill designed to stop people using common sense? And if this is the case, I find this an exceptionally serious issue.
And I think there's 2 points here. One is, you did this to your mother. Now, I don't think probably in the future, if you looked after your mother and you tried to help her, I don't think that's probably going to be an issue. But it's your ability to buy those particular foods or the particular vitamins or minerals that you needed for your mother, that won't be available anymore. But on the second note, I've noticed that the bill is really gagged practitioners. So, for example, let's say there's an Indian herb, which I think has now been banned in New Zealand. It's been proven categorically in studies that it lowers heart blood pressure and it's very, very beneficial, but it's banned in New Zealand already, okay, because it competes with the blood-lowering medications of the doctors and the medical industry. Now, if someone was to say, well, that herb is really good for lowering blood pressure, bang, gag order, you could be fined, I think, don't quote me on this, $200,000. Like the penalties are absolutely severe for providing any medical or natural health advice. So, what does that alarm you?
Well, not only does it alarm me, but I quoted the example of my mother just as an illustrative example. Now, I know somebody else, and I'm sure you do too. And in fact, this chap had no hope whatever. 15 years ago, at a guess, and doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong on exactly the number of years ago.
Roughly 12, I think.
Is it 12?
Yeah,
well, we both know who we're talking about, and if you've got a more accurate figure, I'm happy to accept it. And the point behind the comment is, though, that this chap, to the best of my knowledge, is living in good health today. I see him regularly. He tells me he's getting on extremely well, apart from an accident on a mountain. That's nothing to do with his actual physiology. It's more to do with the luck of the draw in life with those sort of things. And I feel myself that if he's yet another example, like my mother, of someone who is beaten, if you like, the rules, then surely he has the right to say to somebody, I did so-and-so, I used so-and-so, I was happy with so-and-so and it worked for me. Now, going back to my mother for a moment, she died at 95. Well, I don't consider that a too bad a record. And I consider myself that what we did in giving her common sense help, not practicing medicine, just giving her common sense help. And if anyone says that you were practicing medicine, then that's defining medicine outside the boundaries of common sense. And I don't accept that. I accept medicine as something that's a highly specialised thing, not an everyday thing. I consider it something where you've got definite treatments with things that are extremely dangerous or need extreme care or they need extreme expertise in some way. But what we're talking about here, if I read this correctly, is that this legislation that's been proposed is to remove the ground of common sense. Is that a fair comment?
I think that's a great comment, and as you were talking, it's made me reflect that over the last 12 years of having the Brian Functional Medicine Centre, whilst we don't practice medicine, we have seen people, terminal conditions, that are still alive today. Now, if this bill was passed 12 years ago, I don't believe that would be the case at all. Would that be a fair comment?
I think that is a fair comment, and as one who has had considerable amount to do with Bryolyn, and also a thorough believer that the work that is done at Bryolyn is sound common sense, and often people are saying it's highly specialised. Now, is highly specialised work nowadays embracing common sense? And if that is the case, then there's something wrong with our whole society, and my own feeling is that there's something wrong with the government legislation.
I think what's more scary about this bill as well is it actually is not absolute definite. It actually gives the ability to wipe out what they want. And they're going to appoint one regulator who's going to determine what's good and what's bad. And I think that's a very scary thing, to have one person with so much power that can decide, well, actually lemon's pretty good product, maybe we need to ban lemon as well. When you go down, you can't buy a health product which is going to help with a bit of pain. You can't go down to the local farmer's market and buy some cream that's been made out of some local herbs that helps with a little bit of skin condition. That's all going to be wiped out. But appointing a regulator with almost the ultimate power of what they want to do is quite scary.
Oh, it's extremely scary. And what's worse about the single person in what is called an absolute control of the entire system is that single person can be given backhanders in all sorts of ways that are either direct or indirect, and those what I call advantages, payments, or what I would call cutting edge, if you like, manipulations, can come that way in complete innocence. They can come that way in silent, what I would call twists and turns, and they can also come that way in all sorts of indirect and incomprehensible manners that people can't pick up. And I have a very serious question on a single regulator or a single controller. Now, if you look at any major controlling factor in our society, would not it be fair to say that it is normally built in such a way as to have some sort of counterbalancing, counter-checking mechanism? Very seldom does one person have the complete say without, shall we say, some sort of transparency being offered. That's the reason why we have a government and not have a single dictator. Although one looks at what's being done with this bill and wonders whether we are going to have what we would call a dictatorship, replacing what is called government. So I've got a real question mark over this. And I think it's a very serious issue, extremely serious.
I think this is potentially one of the worst bills to be passed, if it's going to be passed. So what do you encourage people to do about it?
Well, I believe that the option of putting in submissions is available, and it will have to be done pretty promptly, of course, because we've only got now
15th of February.
Yeah,
Just in a few weeks' time.
A couple of weeks left from the time that we're making this effort to suggest to people that they do it. And my thought on it is that we should not be obliging upon people the need to do this, because what we're doing is we're actually saying to people that if you want to exercise common sense, you've got to put in a submission and make a scream and a cry to be able to do it. And what I'm saying is that the government is saying that we have to now make an appeal to simply get common sense to prevail. Now, I've got a question mark over that. What is this government trying to do? And I believe it's an additionally serious thing to oblige upon people this need when it should be the government's responsibility to make sure this common sense ground is provided for them.
So in summary, Philip, what do we need to know?
If you were to ask me to summarise this, I would say that if the government has got 3,000 synthetic chemicals that are legally allowed in supermarket foods, which they have, I gather, then the question that I would say to summarise what's going on is that if there is further control required in natural products which are something like 45,000 times more safe, right, then I believe that there's almost a reason for believing that the government deliberately wants to make things worse. Now, I didn't say there was a reason for that. I said it looks as though there almost is a reason, which means that I'm suspicious. Now, you're going to say, but you can't criticise the government like that. I didn't say I was criticising the government. I was saying there is a case for having a look at whether what I am saying might be, in fact, along the right lines. So in summary, as I see it, there's a question mark over what the government is doing and why. And I believe I'd like to know, why are they really doing this or trying to do this? And why do they want this legislation in place?
Are you promoting misinformation, Philip? Like, what credentials do you have? Are you a conspiracy theorist?
That's a very good comment, because misinformation is an extremely bad thing. a very bad thing indeed. And I've never come across this word until very recently, that this government introduced it. And I think it was our Prime Minister, who's now disappearing off the horizon, who said that she was the sole source of what was not misinformation. And if that was her belief, she's entitled to have it. We're also entitled to ignore it, because in actual fact, this question of misinformation does make me wonder where that word sprung from. Now, when I was a child, there was no such word. I didn't find it in my vocabulary at all, and I now wonder where this word has come from and what it means. We used to have a thing called debate. We used to have a thing called sifting information. I've been brought up with a science background. I did scientific training and I had a scientifically based education originally, and my background was that if you wanted to find out information, you sifted it, you sorted it out, you got different opinions on it. There was no such thing as misinformation. It was more a question of sorting out what information one wanted and what one believed in and what one could call credible, and that was how information was framed. It was all information and you used it. I think the comment that could be made here, William, is that we're flooded with data. There's no question about the amount of data we've got. And as I understand it, data is not information. And information needs sorting. We've talked about misinformation and information. And unless we get from data definite information out of it, then the data is no use to us. But information is not knowledge. And until we get some real knowledge of what we're talking about, then that doesn't really get us anywhere. But even if you've got the knowledge that, if you like, sets everything in its context and sorts it out, I think it's fair to say that there's one other thing that needs to be built into this equation to make the thing what I call common sense, because that's where I've been coming from in my own deductions about this, and that is we need wisdom. We need to make wise decisions. We need to think carefully what we're doing. Now, is this government thinking with wisdom, or is it controlling with aggression? And I'd summarise it with that question that needs to be answered.